According to AP News, a Texas megachurch pastor was sent to prison for a massive fraud scheme recently. But it wasn't just any megachurch pastor. He was the spiritual advisor to two U.S. presidents, Bush Jr. and Obama. And it wasn't just any fraud scheme. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison for scamming investors out of millions of dollars. Wasn't scamming regular church members enough? His name is Kirby John Caldwell from Shreveport, Louisiana. And he and his co-conspirator were indicted for this back in 2018. The trial finally came to a close with their sentencing in January 2021. Sit back, it's gonna get interesting. According to federal prosecutors, Caldwell and his accomplice Gregory A. Smith, an investment advisor, talked people into investing $3.5 million in historical Chinese bonds. Unfortunately, the bonds aren't recognized by China's current government, which changed from the Republic of China to the Chinese Communist Party in 1949, and have no investment value. Oh, I'm starting to get it now. Getting 10% of your members' income every month wasn't enough. He wanted something big. Why would he do this? In a capitalist market, if you're working with millions of dollars already, which he was, there are a billion legal ways to double it. Spend $250,000 to have a suite of Bible apps written, and get everybody in your congregation to buy them. Put ads in. Spend $500,000 on rundown houses, another $200,000 renovating them, and sell them back for twice the cost. Buy the masters to some old popular song and sit back and wait for the money to roll in. If you have capital, you can get more capital. That's the whole point of a capitalist economy. Why did this dude choose to scam people instead of working within the system to make more money? My guess is he might have been in some hot water with some shady people. Maybe he needed a lot of money immediately. We'll probably never know. But I feel like we can all learn two things from this. One, megachurch pastors will scam you out of money even when they don't have to. It seems to be in their nature. And two, if you do things above board, you don't have to worry as much about going to prison for 6 years. Unless you're poor, of course. Pastor Greg Locke is a popular figure right now. For some reason, when Twitter dropped the ban hammer on a bunch of QAnon accounts, they skipped right over him. So we have the benefit of watching him completely melt down into conspiracy land. Here's his latest conspiracy. Mitch McConnell was in a Senate hearing over something recently, and in the background, you can see somebody in the bleachers or pews or whatever the fuck you call them, stretching out their hands. Pastor Locke interpreted this as a sign from the Illuminati. He believes they were making a triangle shape with their hands, and it was supposed to be a signal to Mitch that they're watching him, and he better say the right things or he'll end up quote-unquote like Jimmy Hoffa. Now, I did a video about Greg Locke's Twitter account the other day, and I passed over that video. I pointed out how ridiculous it was at the time. Didn't go beyond that, but it's apparently been knocking around in Greg Locke's head for a while, because he talked about it during a recent sermon. Here's what he said.
And the clearest thing I've ever seen in my life is when Mitch McConnell gets off track, he turns around and the guy behind him gives him the Illuminati hand signal of authoritarianism to make sure he stays on track. Just remind that sucker, we're still in control, we're still paying your bills, and you do anything against what we say, and we'll make sure nobody finds your body, Jimmy Hoffa.
Wow, dude, you're still thinking about that. The guy was just stretching out his hands. How do you get more delusional than this? Is there a level past this? I guess the next level is tinfoil hat territory, and as far as I know, he hasn't hit that yet. But I guess we have no way of knowing what he does in the privacy of his own home. We've talked about Dianna Lorraine before, but if you haven't seen those clips, let me explain. She's been a die-hard QAnon supporter for years, and she's a host on the Infowars show, colleagues with the one and only Alex Jones. And of course, she had some choice words for Republicans who weren't out there during the attack on the Capitol. Let's give it a listen.
What we saw yesterday was the most epic form of resistance that we have seen in some time. This was the spirit of 1776 emanating from all of us, every fiber of our beings. It was this true spirit of resistance, not these people that go to these ridiculous rallies over and over every weekend, honking their horns, warning, waving their American flags. I mean, that's great, but you pretend that you're fighting the commies, that you pretend you're 1776. But you are not 1776 if you're not willing to put yourself at risk and do what we did yesterday.
So that's how you flip the script. For the record, I'm not really sure if Dianna Lorraine was in the attack or not. I would guess not, but I think Alex Jones was there. Either way, what she's doing here is defending the use of violence. She's an extremist. If you believe in violence in the US to political ends, then I consider you an extremist, plain and simple. And honestly, I know she doesn't realize this, but the vast majority of the US population agrees. If you use violence to achieve your goals, it doesn't benefit you in the end. You look like an extremist. And the other side, the side that disagrees with you politically, politically, they use it against you. You're only giving them ammunition. Martin Luther King Jr. understood that. That's why he was purely nonviolent. But this chick is taking pride in the fact that she believes in violence. These people need therapy, seriously. But even me saying that makes them believe that I want to send them to camps. Half the US is in tinfoil hat mode, and I really don't know how to solve it. Pastor Greg Locke is a popular figure this week. Obviously, he's a gigantic, obnoxious Trump supporter. And as I mentioned earlier, he believes the Illuminati is out to get him. But over the past few months, no matter how bleak it looked, he continued to believe and claim that Trump is going to be inaugurated on January 20th, despite contradictory evidence. Despite the fact that he clearly lost the election fair and square, he never let go of that delusion. Well, he decided to get up on stage in front of his entire congregation and tell them that other pastors stupidly claimed that God told them that Trump would be inaugurated. Give this a listen.
Now what's floating around on the internet is all of these people that, let me use the word loosely, prophesied that Trump was going to remain in the presidency for the remaining 4 years. Now they're all being called false prophets, and so here's what they're doing. Now they're sending out these letters and these statements saying, well, somehow or another, we got it wrong, which, by the way, they're going to feel very, very stupid in a couple of weeks.
Okay, fair enough. They made a fool of themselves, something we can both agree on. After calling out his fellow idiots, he said this.
If you go back and watch every video from this platform or any video that I've done, even the one from the tree that I shared a couple of months ago or a month and a half ago about the dream, you will notate that I am very careful not to say the word of the Lord told me to tell you that Donald Trump is going to remain the president for the next 4 years. I have said I have good authority. I believe with all of my heart. I am 1,010% confident. But never one time did I say that Donald Trump is going to remain the president because the Lord told me that he was. Now, I may have a strong opinion on that, but I've been careful not to willy-nilly use those phrases because when God tells me something, I want to make sure that God told me that something.
Okay, interesting. So he's saying he never claimed God told him that Trump would be inaugurated. Tall claim, but I don't feel like going through hours of content to find an example of it. Let's take his word for it for the sake of argument. Listen to the next part.
Now, that being said, I'm not trying to backpedal because there is one conspiracy theory in the world right now and only one. The real conspiracy theory are the foolish people that think Joe Biden is actually going to be the president of the United States on January the 20th. You have lost your mind if you believe that.
Okay, rationality has left the chat. What does he think is going to happen? He doesn't believe it's going to be divine intervention. He specifically said God did not tell him that Trump would be president. He made that pretty clear in the last couple clips. Without divine intervention, there are two possible paths to a Trump victory, as far as I can tell. Possible path number one, his insurrectionists rise up, destroy the entire government, and install a dictatorship with Trump as the leader. Possibility number two, the deep state really does exist, and Trump really was taking him down. And everything QAnon said turns out to be true. I don't really see any other way around this. Trump has exhausted every legal avenue he had. No options left. And he even committed acts of sedition in an effort to take the election win from Biden. It all failed. So what does Greg Locke expect? At this point, I'm really not sure there's anything knocking around up there. Time to put the tinfoil hat back on. You guys remember Pastor Robert Jeffress, right? He's the guy who said this.
Look, David, there is a great contrast between the peaceful civil rights protest of John Lewis and Martin Luther King Jr., who actually based their protest on the teachings of the Bible, compared to these anarchists who are basing what they're doing on rebellion against the Bible.
And this.
We have allowed the atheists, the secularists, the humanists to hijack our Constitution and pervert it into something our forefathers never intended. That's what the problem is.
He's an extremist Christian who believes that church and state should be indistinguishable from each other. But after the election ended, surprisingly, he wrote an op-ed on Fox News basically saying that Republicans should align behind Biden. It was a huge surprise, to me at least, especially considering what percentage of Trump's base is made up of extremist evangelical Christians. And after the attack on the Capitol, he tweeted that he doesn't accept political violence when the left does it, and he won't accept it when the right does it either. Knock me over with a feather. Seriously surprising. Well, Jeffress is back in the news. He came out and said the real Christians had absolutely nothing to do with the attack on the Capitol. Well then, that's interesting. I have to say there are plenty of Christians there who believe they're real. What's the defining factor that makes your congregation different from them? What if some of your congregation was in the crowd? Are they going to be excommunicated? The Christians who participated in the attack believe they were completely in the right to do what they did. I'm trying to wrap my mind around this guy's logic, but I have to keep reminding myself that there's none to be found here. He said, quote, "We've got to acknowledge what happened on Wednesday at the Capitol was not only a crime, it was a sin against God. The people who stormed the Capitol, the people who killed that police officer, were not a part of the kingdom of God, as some claimed. They were a part of the kingdom of Satan." End quote. Fascinating. Well, I think the guy is wrong. There were a ton of people there who claimed to be Christian. And who is he to tell them otherwise? Christian is a self-assigned label. If somebody says they're a Christian, then they're a Christian. That's simple. But I think the quote from him is significant for other reasons. This is his attempt to distance himself even further from Trump. He wrote that op-ed on Fox News about standing behind Biden, and he's now tweeted and spoken publicly about how bad the attack was, how he didn't stand behind it. This is actually a pretty big deal. The guy is the leader of a megachurch, has a show on Fox News, and he's a contributor on there constantly. They always have him on as their resident Jesus expert. He's a major representative for the evangelical voting bloc. This is evidence of a massive party schism. The Republican Party is falling apart right now, and I have to say, it's a delight to watch.